So culture and imperialism. This text is an anatomy of the Western discourse or the Oriental discourse. Oriental discourse means the discourse which is prepared or which is constructed by the West about the East. So, what does this discourse say? This discourse says that East is never a proper match of the West. East does not have any history. It does not go with civilization. It is living with nature, the primitive status or state of nature. East does not have any history. It does not have any culture and manner. And this very discourse is not only always political, but also literary. If we read the literary texts produced by Rudyard Kipling, suppose his Kim, a famous novel. In this novel, the Indian characters are depicted with all their ludicrous characteristics. The Indians are clownish, Indians are not punctual, they are absurd, they do not have any harmony in their thinking, in their lifestyle, in their way of life also. And the Indians are living with nature. And if you read history, colonial history, you will find that this India was familiarized. It was also branded by the European countries as a location of tuberculosis, as a location of malaria, as a location of plague. So whatever is bad, whatever is ominous, is living in the East, is in India. And whatever is good, whatever is superior, is with Europe. Whatever is chivalric is with Europe. And whatever is callous, weak, or coward is living with the East. And for that reason, a great propagandist of imperialism, Rudyard Kipling, has said in one of his poems. In that very poem, he has said very haughtily said that East is East and West is West, and these twin can never come together. That is, East can never be an equal to the West. So that was the haughty or very proud promulgation of Rudyard Kipling. He worked as a spokesman, as an exponent of imperialism. And this promulgation is not done politically. It is done literally, or in the form of literature more than in the form of politics. So we must not take up literary texts as a source of entertainment only. Literary texts are to be taken with suspicion, with curiosity, with a disposition of investigation. We have to anatomize the literary texts. We have to unveil the metaphors and other rhetorical devices. And behind this veil, we will find what an uncut picture of this East is depicted there, is projected or constructed there. This is called Oriental discourse or Orientalism. Edward Said, in his book, in his seminal book, Orientalism, has said this very powerfully. And it is the reason for which we say that Edward Said's Orientalism has divided our world of intellectuality into two phases. One phase was prior to the publication of Orientalism, that is, just a minute. So prior to the publication of Orientalism, okay. So the Oriental discourse constructed by the West is a project of distorting East, misinterpreting and malrepresenting East as an entity devoid of history and civilization, devoid of culture. So if we are convinced by this very concoction or fabricated history, fabricated construction, then what will we do? We will go to the West for civilization. So while we will go to the West for civilization and take up their so-called civilization, their so-called discipline, so-called education, so-called lifestyle, then what will happen? We will be transformed into others. We will never be equal to them because they will never welcome us to be their brothers or to be their sisters. Remember this. However fluently you speak English, or whatever standard English you speak, or whatever amazing your accent may be, believe you will never be received by the West as their brothers or as their equals. Then what's their purpose? Their purpose is to transform us into others. This is called otherization project. So Oriental discourse is a tool which is used to otherize the people of Asia, the people of Africa, the people of Latin America, different countries of Latin America, you know. So Edward Said's Orientalism, the seminal book, which was published in 1978, clarified these points and very successfully drew our attention to this Western politics. And this politics is not done by the hardwares of the war only. It's also done by the books of literature or literary texts. Religious text also, suppose the Bible. The Bible is a very powerful tool. And about the Bible, the Africans believed that while the Western colonizers used to visit Africa, they had sword at one hand and the Bible at another hand. So what does it mean? It means that the Bible was not less potent or less effective than the sword. The Bible was given to the local people. They were converted into Christians. So they were uprooted from their religion or faith system or belief system. If a community is uprooted from its belief system, then very easily it becomes detached from its culture. Culture is the identity of a community. If you don't have any culture, you don't have any identity. Because culture encompasses all the things, all the constituents or ingredients that define your identity, that locate your identity. So your location, your definition are decided by the ingredients of your culture. So when you are detached from your culture, when you do not speak your own language, you speak the language of the outsiders. When you do not follow your rituals, you celebrate the rituals of the outsiders. While you do not perform your religious festivals, while you do not worship your own God, but worship the God of the outsiders, you are an other. This is called otherization. So otherization process is an epistemological process. It is not a process which is very crudely visible or which is done very crudely with the help of the weapons of the battlefield. It is rather done with the help of these softwares, especially intellectual elements, cultural elements, aesthetic elements, linguistic elements of the colonizers. Actually, these are the things that Edward Said has offered to his readers. So after reading his Orientalism, the whole world developed a conscious about the politics, very deliberate politics of literary texts. So this consciousness got a formal shape after the publication of the Orientalism. For that reason, it is said that the world after Orientalism is different from the world before the Orientalism. Because before the publication of Orientalism, our reading of the literary text concentrated, was centered on aesthetic revelation or aesthetic findings. And we tried to derive entertainment from literary texts. But after reading this Orientalism, we come to know that these literary texts should be read critically. These literary texts are the repository of history, culture, rituals, your intellectual faculty, your linguistic realities, your psychological realities, political realities, your nationality, nationalism, national identity. All these things are accumulated in a literary text. All these things are imprisoned between two cover pages of a book. So a book is just like a Pandora's box. When you will approach from Scythian perspective to a text, you will find that the world that you discover there is totally different. You will be sad while you will discover your caricature there, constructed by the Western writers. Dr. Aziz in Our Passage to India is a caricature of the Indians. He does not represent the Indians. His character is exaggeratedly constructed. Aziz is a Western educated person. He has received his education from the Western country, England. But he appears to be very awkward, clumsy, clownish. So what does E.M. Forster mean to say? He means to say that however educated you may be, you are not our equal. Okay. So this pride of the empire is echoed in the literary text. So in this very text, Culture and Imperialism, actually this is a book of essays, and all these essays are derived from the lectures that Edward Said delivered in different universities of America and Europe. And all these lectures are very resourceful regarding their contents, regarding Said's philosophic and deep and profound observation of the functions of literary text among the countries which were previously colonies of the European colonizing countries, for example, England, France, and Portugal, these three major colonizing countries. So now I like to take you back to the text. I like to read from the text and explain. Now I just request you to let me remember where I stopped in the last class. A great deal of recent criticism has come.
Sir, culture convinced in this way we can become a protective conclosure. আমরা এখান থেকে আজকে পড়ব।
Oh yes, I got it. Culture conceived in this way. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's start from here. Culture conceived in this way can become a protective enclosure. Check your politics at the door before you enter it. As someone who has spent his entire professional life teaching literature, yet who also grew up in the pre-World War II colonial world, I have found it a challenge not to see culture in this way, that is, antiseptically quarantined from its worldly affiliations, but as an extraordinarily varied field of endeavor. The novels and other books I consider here, I analyze because, first of all, I find them estimable and admirable works of art and learning in which I and many other readers take pleasure and from which we derive profit. Second, the challenge is to connect them not only with that pleasure and profit, but also with the imperial process of which they were manifestly and unconcealedly a part. So now mark these 2 points. You can read literary texts for profit of deriving pleasure from the text. You may call it profit, that is, you are deriving pleasure from the literary text. But Edward Said has made us alert about the politics of literary texts. He has said that we have to learn the literary texts as ingredients of imperial process. So imperial process, that is the process of imperialization, is going on. And this process is aided, this process is invigorated, supported by the literary texts. So the literary texts, these are the weapons of imperialization mission. Imperial process of which they were manifestly and unconcealedly a part, rather than condemning or ignoring their participation in what was an unquestioned reality in their societies. I suggest that. Now let us know Edward Said's suggestion. Said says, I suggest that what we learn about the hitherto ignored aspect actually and truly enhances our reading and understanding of them. So we have to read literary texts with a conscious mind, with a suspicious mind. We have to develop susceptibility about literary texts produced by the Western world, especially about the East. While they write about the East, you must not think that they are glorifying your identity or they are glorifying your culture. They are just trying to show that you are inferior to them. So take up the white man's burden. Rudyard Kipling invites the people of this subcontinent to take up the white man's burden. So, what's the burden of the white man? Civilization. In his word, civilization is the white man's burden. Now, burden, this very word is very uh, meaningful. It deserves connotations, interpretations. Now, why does he call it burden? Suppose colonizing process is associated with suppression, oppression, persecution, repression. Okay, the colonizers torture us. They also shed our blood. They exercise cruelty upon the natives. So all these practices of the colonizers may make us think that they are our part. But Rudyard Kipling says that this very burden is a benevolent burden because if you take up this burden, you will be civilized, you will be cultured, you will have your language, you will have your new identity. So that is called civilizing mission, and Rudyard Kipling has branded it as a white man's burden. So this is really ironical. Rudyard Kipling was a spokesman of imperialism, and he was also a jingoist, a broker of imperialism. He was a progeny of the brutality of imperialism. For that reason, it was possible for him to speak like this. Let me say a little here about what I have in mind using two well-known and very great novels. Dickens's Great Expectation is primarily a novel about self-delusion, about Pip's vain attempts to become a gentleman, with neither the hard work nor the aristocratic source of income required for such a role. Early in life, he helps a condemned convict, Abel Magwitch, who, after being transported to Australia, pays back his young benefactor with large sums of money. Because the lawyer involved says nothing as he disburses the money, Pip persuades himself that an elderly gentlewoman, Miss Havisham, has been his patron. Magwitch then reappears illegally in London, unwelcomed by Pip because everything about the man reeks of delinquency and unpleasantness. In the end, though Pip is reconciled to Magwitch and to his reality, he finally acknowledges Magwitch, hunted, apprehended, and fatally ill, as his surrogate father, not as someone to be denied or rejected. Though Magwitch is in fact unacceptable, being from Australia, a penal colony designed for the rehabilitation but not the repatriation of transported English criminals. So it sounds very cruel. Charles Dickens's Great Expectation. This text is referred to here. And in this text, we find a criminal, Abel Magwitch. He is a fugitive. He has fled from the custody. And Pip, a very young boy, helped him in his while he was hiding in the graveyard. He had chains at his hands. So this very boy helped him with files. That is, he cut off his chains and liberated him from the chains. This very Magwitch fled to Australia, which was a British colony. And we know that Australia was the land of the Aborigines. For 50,000 years, the Aborigines have been living there. But the British Captain James Cook went there in 15th century, and he declared that that very country belonged to the British Empire. So just think how cruelly, how ironically they declared their ownership of different parts of the world. They annihilated the inheritance of the natives there. And this process of annihilation or depriving the natives of their inheritance of identity and culture is very metaphorically projected in literary texts also. So Magwitch's prosperity in Australia metaphorically interprets how the colonizers developed materially in different colonies of the world. So the mystery of the secret of their prosperity was their exploitation and practice of brutality there.